Bob Bridges' body has carried him through 87 years of life. But not for much longer. Time has worn Bob's body out. Every one of his organs is in decline. Our bodies have evolved to last only long enough to pass our genes to the next generation. Once we have reproduced and reared our children, we are all dispensable. Bob fulfilled his biological purpose long ago. He's living on borrowed time. Since the day he was born, the cells in Bob's body have been dying. But his body is designed to replace them.
Look, Quatty, it's from Ralph. Ralph. Right. King takes Paul.
It's because his body is constantly repairing and renewing itself that Bob has been able to survive for 87 years. Every day of his life, he's lost 1 billion cells from the surface of his skin. But just a millimeter beneath the skin's surface lie specialist cells called stem cells. These cells are factories producing healthy new skin cells to take the place of those that die. Bob has different kinds of stem cells all over his body. They have replaced his bones, his blood, even the lining of his stomach, over and over again. The cycle of renewal is so rapid that most of his body has never been more than 10 years old. Some parts only 3 days old.
Fancy the West Beach today?
But some of Bob's most vital organs, including his heart and his brain, are made of cells which can never be renewed. These cells have suffered almost 9 decades of toxic damage. They have been attacked by pollution and ultraviolet light. But even in the cleanest environment, cells get damaged because they generate their own pollutants. Inside every cell in Bob's body are tiny electrically charged particles known as free radicals. Free radicals are the waste products of healthy cell activity. Highly volatile, they have the potential to damage anything they collide with. At the heart of the cell is its blueprint, its DNA. It's struck by free radicals around 10,000 times a day. Usually the DNA repairs itself, but on very rare occasions, the repair process fails. With an altered blueprint, the cell's behavior becomes unpredictable. The body's solution is drastic. A cell with severely damaged DNA is programmed to commit suicide. With every passing day, more and more of Bob's cells die. And the stem cells which manufacture new cells are dying too. Bob is, quite simply, wasting away. It's the cumulative effect of cells dying all over his body, which is taking its toll on the quality of Bob's life. When he walks, Bob's brain sends signals to stimulate the muscles in his legs. But in his spinal cord, free radicals have killed off nerve cells. Connections have been broken. Signals can no longer get through. Bob's leg muscles have grown weaker. These weakened muscles need more oxygen to keep them moving. But Bob's breathing apparatus, from his windpipe to his lungs, is not what it was. He's lost 1/6 of the delicate surface which absorbs oxygen into his blood. His breathing is shallow and inefficient. Worse still, Bob's heart has lost 1/4 of its muscle cells. Less and less oxygen is being pumped to his legs. He used to be able to run at more than 10 miles an hour. Now 2 miles an hour is as fast as his legs can carry him.
Oh, it's Grandad. Morning, Dad. Morning. What's this then, Simon?
Reward for helping me with a new stock.
Would never happen in my day.
You only sold typewriters.
So you think you need the practice then, do you?
Bob's most precious organ is his brain. Somewhere in the trillions of connections between his brain cells lie his personality and memory. If his brain cells were replaced, everything that Bob is would be lost.
Splendid. Must run in the family.
It's not that brain cells don't die. Free radicals, and even the odd bump on the head, have contributed to Bob's brain losing 50,000 cells each day of his life. But because we're born with many more brain cells than we ever use or need, the effects of a shrinking brain take a long time to show. Even though 10% of his brain cells have died, Bob is still mentally sharp most of the time. But the death toll isn't evenly spread across his brain. Certain abilities are beginning to suffer.
Your dad never used to help me in the shop.
Well, maybe you should have paid him.
Did he give you anything to do?
You know he did, Grandad. He gave me that chess game.
Deep in Bob's brain is an area called the hippocampus. Its role is to translate experiences into memories. Since he was 50, it has lost 1/5 of its cells. His brain is now less able to lay down new memories. This may explain one of the paradoxes of old age, that Bob can't remember recent events as well as he can recall experiences from his distant past. Every time we learn a new skill, our brain cells reach out and forge connections with each other. But over the years, Bob's brain has become less able to make these fresh connections. It's more difficult for him to learn new skills. The organs which feed information to Bob's brain are degenerating too. In his inner ear, years of noise have destroyed sound-sensitive cells. He began to lose the ability to hear high-pitched sounds when he was only 30. Since he was 50, Bob has been long-sighted. Ironically, his sight has been damaged by his body's own efforts at repair. The lens in his eye maintains itself by regularly coating its surface with a transparent protein. But as more and more layers have been laid down, his lens has become rigid. And a rigid lens is more difficult to focus. Bob's senses may have suffered the ravages of time, but the skills he's practiced throughout his life are still as sharp as ever. When connections between brain cells are used repeatedly, the connections themselves stay strong.
Might be a new table, but still the same old game.
Just like his muscles, the more Bob uses his brain cells, the less likely they are to die.
See you tomorrow.
Simon, thank you for letting me beat you at pinball.
Bye.
Bob has kept himself alert and alive for nearly 90 years. But the truth is, that's far longer than humans were designed to survive. And now, Bob's losing his grasp on life. The cells in Bob's body have many functions, but all of them generate heat, and this heat helps to sustain Bob's life. But now, with a dwindling number of cells, he's colder than he used to be. Even worse, Bob is less able to conserve his body heat. Our temperature is controlled by the blood vessels in our skin. When we're hot, they expand to give out excess heat. When we're cold, they constrict to divert blood and heat into the core of our bodies. But Bob has lost this ability. Even though he's cold, the blood vessels in his hands are still losing heat to the outside world. Like old pipes, his vessels are furred up with fat and calcium. His central heating system is no longer working as it should. Bob's temperature control is one of many systems in his body which are only just coping with the demands of everyday life. In Bob's stomach, his lunch is broken down by digestive acid. His stomach shields itself from this acid with a cellular lining. But just like everywhere else in his body, the stem cells which generate this lining are starting to die off. Bob doesn't know it, but his stomach wall is getting threadbare and open to acid attack. For most of us, this would pose no real danger. But in Bob's increasingly fragile state, it could easily become life-threatening. Digestive acid has burnt its way right through his stomach wall into an artery. Blood pours through the hole into his stomach. But all Bob feels is a little queasy and lightheaded.
Not feeling too good, Qwerty. I think I'll have a little lie down.
Bob is in very little pain, but his body is just too old to cope with this crisis. If he were a younger man, his perforated artery would instantly constrict to slow the loss of blood. But his aged, furred-up blood vessel is too stiff. Pints of blood are pouring into his stomach. Bob's blood pressure is dropping. His heart beats faster to keep blood moving round his body. But even pumping at its maximum rate, his fragile heart cannot restore his blood pressure to normal.
Not now, Qwerty. Not now.
For Bob, this is the beginning of the end. Bob's stomach is starting to digest his own leaking blood, releasing potassium into his bloodstream. His body is no longer strong enough to filter it out, and potassium can reset the rhythm of the heart. Bob's heart starts to beat irregularly. For the first time in nearly 90 years, the supply of blood and oxygen being pumped around his body falters. The most devastating impact is on his brain. For all its power, the brain is a fragile organ. It needs constant and plentiful supplies of oxygen. It's vulnerable to the slightest drop in blood flow. In a vain attempt to conserve energy, Bob's brain suspends all activity except that which keeps his body functioning. Bob slips into unconsciousness. His heart is pumping so little blood, it can no longer support its own beat. Slowly, it is grinding to a halt. The traffic of blood around Bob's body has ceased. Death is now inevitable. Though Bob is still breathing, there is no oxygen getting to his cells. The cause of each death is as individual as the life which preceded it, but the order in which the body shuts down is always the same. The first cells to die are in the brain. As death approaches, they release waves of morphine-like chemicals called endorphins, which blot out any anxiety or pain. Dying cells in his visual cortex start to fire off signals at random. Although his eyes are shut, it's as if he's seeing. This may explain the tunnel of light which many people report when brought back from the brink of death. Finally, brain cells detach from one another, breaking the connections they had made during a lifetime of thinking and remembering. Bob's brain is dead. Now all remaining body function ceases. Death is a process in which every tissue and organ shuts down at its own pace. Bob's body will continue making skin cells for several minutes. His muscles will live on for hours, but eventually these too will stop. As cell after cell ceases its activity, Bob's body stops generating its own heat. With its internal fire extinguished, it starts to cool towards the temperature of the room. Bob is dead, but he still has a biological presence. The blueprint for his cells, his DNA, has been passed down to his son, and from his son to his grandson. Though his consciousness has gone, Bob's characteristics live on.